Today's lesson is about similar figures. Set up and solve a proportion to find the missing side of similar figures. In our example, each pair of figures is similar. Find the missing side. In our first problem, problem A, we have two triangles that are similar. Also, we could say they're proportional. I can see that the segment labeled 6 and the segment labeled X correspond to the segments labeled 3 and 11 on the other triangle. And by noticing which sides correspond, I've set up a proportion that I can solve. X times 3 is 3x. 6 times 11 is 66. Divide both sides by 3. And x, the missing side, is 22 units. Our next problem has two similar rectangles. X from the first rectangle and 2 from the first rectangle correspond to 7.5 and 5 from the second rectangle. Notice that we had the lengths at the top and the widths on the denominators, or in the denominators. We can now cross multiply. X times 5 is 5x. 7.5 times 2 is 15. And then divide both sides by 5 to get x by itself. And we find that x is 3. But to answer this problem, since our units of measurement are included, we need to include the unit of measurement of meters, and so x is 3 meters. In this problem C, we've got a couple things that are different. Number one, we have more information given, more than what's truly necessary. Number two, these triangles are not oriented the same way, so we'll have to look at what we know about them to figure out what sides correspond with what. One thing I notice is that this first triangle has two sides that are labeled 16, and my other one has two sides labeled 24. So I could use either of those to help me out here, and I could say my longest side of the first one, 22, compared with one of the sides, 16, corresponds to X as my longest side for my other rectangle, and one of my other sides is 24. Now it happens to be in this case that these two numbers were the same for a triangle. There were two sides labeled 16 on one of them and two sides labeled 24 on the other. Sometimes you have to just figure out what goes with what. So now I'm going to cross multiply. 16 times x is 16x. And 22 times 24 is 528. Now I want to divide both sides by 16 in order to figure out what x is. And x is 33. We have one last problem. This is another problem where the two figures are oriented differently, but the numbers are all different. So we're going to look at it a moment. I could notice that I could pick any two sides to use, but I need to figure out what corresponds with this x. Notice that it is the longer side that meets this slanted side. So over here, the slanted side meets the longer side and uses 3 as that longer side that meets the slanted side. So let's use those numbers. Let's say 5 over 3 corresponds to the slanted side 15 over x. So now 3 times 15 is 45. 5 times x is 5x. Divide both sides by 5. And we get 9 is x.